there. It's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent, and if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, also do that while you're here. Okay, let's get into it. So as I think you know, we're going to be doing NBA draft-focused episodes between now and the 2023 NBA draft, which is scheduled for June 22nd. It'll be here before you know it. We've already done episodes that touch on Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, the Thompson twins. Today, we're going to focus on Jarace Walker, the 6'8", 240-pound forward from Houston, who just helped the Cougars earn a number one seed in the 2023 NCAA tournament. I have him projected right now to go 5th overall to the Detroit Pistons. Is it clear that Jarace Walker should be a top 5 pick in this draft? I'm going to ask Norlander that question next. But first, real quickly, a word from our partners.
Said I'm fired up. I'm sorry your time's up. After the time, came from the ashes, I rise up.
Deadleg, sometimes it's important to get the business out of the way early.
I didn't realize that was right. That was the fastest ad read we've had ever. I wasn't ready.
Deadleg, sometimes you got to get the business out of the way early so that you can focus on
what you're short episode. So we got it done. Yeah,
it's over with. That's done. So let me ask you the question I promised to ask. Is it clear to you Jarace Walker should be a top 5 pick in this draft?
No, not clear at all. Just me, or do you agree that even though we know, like, Wembanyama going 1 to San Antonio, in the past few days I've been thinking about this. It feels like, and you've got a little bit of, you got the Scoop Brandon Miller stuff a little bit there, and we already did that podcast episode, of course. I feel like all the Wemby stuff has really taken a lot of the air and attention and spotlight off of basically anyone after 3 in this draft. Am I overreacting, or would you agree to that? Like, I'm excited to talk about Jarace Walker, don't get me wrong, but relative to, like, we've been doing these prospect-oriented episodes as part of our podcast feed for a few years now, and even before that, I mean, you and I have covered the draft here for well over a decade for CBS Sports. To me, though, like, as we get into the 5, 6, 7 area, it feels like there's less intrigue and interest in these prospects as maybe there has been in the past decade. Agree or disagree?
I think I agree. I'd have to go back in time and try to take a snapshot of how I felt, 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out of previous drafts. But I do feel like it's like Victor, and then let's see what Charlotte does at 2, probably between Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, and then you'll get some Thompson twins, and then some guys, and I think this is probably true with most drafts, but it feels especially true now, and then some guys who, like, they have some physical attributes that make you think they could be great, but they could also just be role players. Like, I think you get outside of Victor, Scoot, Brandon, maybe at least one Thompson twin, possibly 2. The rest of the draft feels like, or at least the rest of the lottery feels like, yeah, you could really get something special, or could just be a role player.
Could be a role player. I agree with that. Now, we will we'll look up in 5, 7 years time here, and there's going to be someone picked 8th or 14th or 26th, and they're going to be, impactful, important players at the NBA level, but projecting that now, they just don't stand out to me. And it's not clear that Jarace Walker makes sense as the surefire guy to be 5th in line. Although that being said, he's going to, in my estimation, where we sit right now, end of May, less than a month out from the draft, you got the Pistons at 5, you've got the Magic at 6, you've got the Pacers at 7. One of those 3 spots, I think he's going to inevitably wind up going to. We will see if, in fact, there winds up being some trade action as well. Obviously, that's possible. That could impact where he goes. To me, he is a player that fit will be important, and that's not something we always say about guys that are top 5 picks. In fact, it's something we may seldom say about guys who are top 5 picks. But to me, Jarace Walker's success at the NBA level and being a above average NBA player through multiple contracts, I think will be dependent upon who drafts him and how well the fit is. And that's obviously something that plays out to a major extent, and with guys taken beyond 15th overall. But top 5, I think it's the case here. I'm sure GP has his stats up, but I'll read them to you real quick. Jarace Walker last season was an important piece, but not for as good as he was as a freshman. And Houston was a dominant team. And part of this was the conference Houston played in. Sure. If you love college basketball and you wanted to see Houston play, you could find them play, but they were not a program that was among the 10 to 15 most watched, despite all their dominance. And in that, Walker was a very good starter, but he was no star. 11.2 points, 6.8 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 1.3 blocks on 46.5% shooting. His offensive rating at KenPom, it was good, not great. 112.5. That's good. That's definitely good, but that's not out of this world. He shot 34.7% from three-point range on 101 attempts. For a guy with his build, 6'8", somewhere around 240, 245. That's some good progress. And in fact, it's because he has those numbers, even though his three-point shot, I'm not quite so certain he's going to be asked to shoot a ton from that distance at the NBA level. He'll be asked to shoot some because he needs to at that size and he has that skill. I'm not convinced that he'll be a 35% three-point shooter at the NBA level, but because he was at the college level, I think that is why he is in the discussion, among some other things, but I think this is significant why he's in the discussion to go as a top 5 pick. I will note, for as intriguing of a prospect as he was, he's also an uncommon in this way. He went for 20 or more points just 5 times in 36 games, so he was not a dominant player. He has attributes that signal that he could be someone that adjusts relatively quickly to the NBA level. Potentially, he's got a lot of strength, a lot of size, really good dexterity in his feet, GP, 7'2", 7'2.5" wingspan on a 6'8" frame, and it's one of the best frames. He's one of the most physically developed players of anyone in this draft. But where do you sit with him? I know you've got him 5th overall in your mock. Where do you sit with him as a prospect? And I guess for our listeners, like, you're trying to predict GM behavior. Do you I don't consider Jarace Walker a top 5 prospect in this class. Do you?
I think he could be. I think it's debatable. I mean, I think everybody at this point is going to have Victor, Scoot, and Brandon in their top 5, right? So now we're picking. We got 2 slots left. Some people would fill them with a couple of Thompson twins. Some people might take one Thompson twin and Jarace Walker, a Thompson twin and Cam Whitmore. There's a lot of different ways you could go. So I guess if you want me to answer the question I initially asked you, it's not clear to me that Jarace Walker should be a top 5 pick, but it's not clear to me that he shouldn't be. And I think once you get past certainly Victor, Scoot, Brandon Miller, and maybe Amin Thompson, I think you can make as good of a case for him as anybody else. I think there's 2 reasons why he wasn't some off-the-chart statistical monster as a freshman in college. One is that he's I don't want to say rare one-and-done prospect whose strength is on the defensive end of the court, but I do think it's unusual as opposed to usual for a one-and-done prospect to be better equipped defensively coming into the NBA than offensively. And I think that is the case with Jarace Walker. He has the opportunity to be a tremendous defender, a versatile defender, and probably pretty quickly, because it's not like he necessarily needs to physically mature. He's 6'8", 240. He is as tall as you'd like a basketball player to be, but with a football player's body. He doesn't always use his body the way you would like. We'll get to that later. But he's going to be able to guard in that league right from the jump. Because he's stronger defensively than offensively, and that's one of the reasons he didn't stand out from a statistical standpoint at Houston. The other reason is I think he went to Houston, where he's going to be playing with Marcus Sasser and Jamal Shead, and he's like Tremont Mark. He had older teammates. It reminded me his college decision, just based on nothing other than roster development. Like when Derrick Rose went to Memphis. Derrick Rose didn't go to Memphis to play with a bunch of other young guys. He went to Memphis and played with a bunch of 22 and 23 and 24-year-olds. He was supposed to be the one and done missing piece to a national champion. And as you know, they finished second. Chalmers for the tie, Dozier for the championship.
Mm-hmm.
Jarace Walker walked into a very similar situation. Like, okay, I'm going to go to college. as a projected lottery pick, as a 5-star everything, but I'm probably not going to be the best player on my team as a freshman. Probably going to be Marcus Sasser. Might not even be the second best player on my team, although I think you can argue he was second leading scorer, second leading rebounder, and a really high-level defender for the most part. So I think he walked into a situation that was built for winning, not necessarily built for, I'm going to come in and post Kevin Durant, Michael Beasley numbers. Like if you took him to South Carolina, which is what another 5-star forward did, like, is he posting bigger numbers at a place like that for a wildly worse team? Probably. But he chose to go to Houston, where his offensive production was always going to be limited. I remember at the Veterans Classic, this was early in the season, but I was Houston and St. Joe's.
Mm-hmm.
And we were at shoot around that morning, and like you just walk in the gym and he looks different, right? Jarace Walker, he just looks different than everybody else. And Kelvin said, I remember Kelvin saying he can shoot it from anywhere right now, but has no idea if it's going in. You know, he can make some, he'll miss some, but he just doesn't, he's not comfortable offensively yet, but he'll get there. All the tools to get there are there. So it was always going to be a work in progress offensively. And it undeniably was. But I think a lot of that had to do with the college that he selected. He was going to have to, play a role for a championship contender. And I think broadly speaking, he played that role pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree. He's interesting to me in that, yeah, his defense is why is also the other reason why he's here. He's a top 5 all-around defender in the draft, and someone that I think will be asked to step in and defend. I'm not going to say 1 through 5. I feel like that's even become too much of a default talking point. How many players they may level, and there are some. How many guys can actually guard 1 through 5?
No, it's like when you hear an AAU coach say, "Oh yeah, I got a guy. He can play all 5 positions." Is his name Magic Johnson?
Yeah.
Or LeBron James? Because if not, you're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
I got a guy who can guard all 5 positions, or I got a guy who can play all 5 positions is the basketball version of, oh, that high school kid, he can run a 4.140. No, he can't. Okay, stop. He can't run a 4.140.
Yeah, or even 4.1 is outrageous. Even 4.2 is outrageous.
Yeah, but
it's ridiculous.
Like I never met a good high school football coach who didn't try to tell me back when I covered high schools. He had some kid who could run a 4.240. All right, yeah. Like no, you can't. He runs a 4.240 and he can guard 1 through 5. Like no, none of that's true. Right. But he can guard. How about this? Small ball 5s. And And he can switch onto wings and guards. He's pretty for a one and done prospect. He's as close to can guard 1 through 5 as you can probably be, even though he's not technically that, if that makes sense.
We're going to popularize. He can guard 1 through 4, or he can guard through 2 through 5. We're going to popularize that. Okay, so I'm going to say he can guard 2 through 5. I think that's possible. Yes, he can play some small ball 5. He has very good feet, and if you watched him play consistently, when I watched Houston play, I remember thinking, like, he just always knows how to make you uncomfortable consistently with his arms on defense. Like, he doesn't have lazy arms. They're always up. They're always active. They're always wide. He's got good wingspan. That's immediately noticeable there. And I think what'll be important for him and why he's in consideration to go as high as 5th is his pick and roll defense is noticeably competent for a player who is that big. I said this when we did our lottery night mock on HQ. I actually think it reflects well on grassroots basketball that a player like Jarace Walker in the year 2023 is up for consideration to be a top 5 pick, because it speaks to obviously his own development and his own intuition and drive and focus. Most of this is on him, but the system's in place. Yes, it's Houston, but even before that, for the past 4 or 5 years, he has grown up into a culture of basketball that has allowed him to be this good, this well-rounded of a player. Like, he's got some offensive skill, but defensively, man, he is aggressive. He understands the reads. He is rarely hesitant in pick and roll defense. He doesn't overplay. And because of that, I think that's why he is so tempting, because overall it would be easy for a player that's, ridiculously built, 6'8", 240-ish to have some attributes that make him a tantalizing prospect, but it's like, he might be a guy that we take, somewhere between 17 and 25. It wouldn't have been hard for Jarace Walker to slip into that range, but he didn't, in part because he, for a few years now, this is pre-Houston, has projected well as someone who can defend so many positions and understands defensive concepts individually and at the team level. And the pick and roll defense is a major part of that. And I will be interested to see, like, if he goes to the Pistons at 5, I think that makes sense defensively. But again, it will come down to fit overall, because to echo what GP kind of said off the top, this is nothing against Jarace Walker. When I look at the players that are in play to be picked in the lottery, like if you draft Jarace Walker, wherever you get him, 5, 6, 7, 8, wherever he goes, it's a win if he's your third best player, in my opinion. That's a good outcome. I don't think you should be drafting him. Certainly not expecting to be your best player. And I think it is a bridge too far, particularly for me. This is just me. It is a bridge too far to think if you're getting Jarace Walker at 5 or 6, he's going to be your second best player off the jump in year 2. I just don't. While he has some, they're not the same players. While some attributes are similar to what Paolo Banchero did a year ago, some, not all, by no means all. Banchero stepped in immediately, rookie of the year. You saw what he was doing. If you're expecting like even 80% of that kind of impact as a rookie, I think you would be expecting too much.
Yeah. He's a versatile defender who's probably a plus defender on the ball, arguably even better as a team defender. Understands rotations and lots of help side blocks. Just a good team defender who knows when and how to help by talking and moving his feet. He's going to be, I think, pretty good, if not great, in that role pretty quickly. The question becomes, and this is where we can pivot into some obvious concerns. The questions are on offense. What can he be offensively? As you mentioned, he shot 34.7% from 3 on 2.8 attempts per game. It's not embarrassing, but it's not great. And he only shot 66.3% from the free throw line, which is not usually a good sign for improvement with the 3-point shot. He'll likely, not definitely, but he'll likely never be an offensive priority. Mm-hmm. But I do think you can put him in pick and rolls and he can score or pass out of that, pick and pop, short rolls. He's equipped to do all that stuff. He's got a short roll, one dribble, little floater, a short roll, one dribble jumper. He can draw a defense in and then, drop it off for dunks and layups. Like, he's a better playmaker than I think some people realize. He's not a point forward exactly. That would be overstating it. But the ball doesn't have to stop with him. I guess that's my point. Yeah. He can get it. He can initiate offense for himself or others. He only averaged 1.8 assists per game, but if you watch it, you can see flashes of actual playmaking from him, catching the ball, on the elbow or short rolling to the free throw line. He can play make out of that. So there's some ability there, but it is not quite a finished product, and not even close to a finished product. But if you tell me he's going to be a reliable 3-point shooter, then I'm ready to say absolutely he should be a top 5 pick. That still is very much up in the air, and there's some statistical stuff there to be skeptical. I mentioned earlier another issue is that he's got this amazing body, but he doesn't really use it the way you would think. He's 6'8", 240, doesn't really play bully ball or initiate a lot of contact or punish smaller players. There's a lot of stuff I watched on film where it's like drive and fade away or drive and float as opposed to drive and
floater. Likes the floater a lot. And that's a good thing. He is not going to be asked to rely on it. And I say rely. He didn't rely. He's not going to be asked to utilize it as much at the NBA level as he did at college level. I agree with you entirely on this.
Yeah, point, I want Ja Morant to utilize a floater rather than go in there and bang bodies with 7-footers who are 260 pounds. But when you're 6'8", 240, I don't need a floater as much as hey, go be a big boy. Like drive it and initiate the contact and punish somebody for trying to take a charge. Punish for somebody for trying to stand in front of you. He doesn't do that as much as you would think somebody who looks like that would do it. And so that's probably just something that at the NBA level, they'll continue to work on and continue to try to make it a mindset. But to be 6'8", 240 with an amazing body, he doesn't on the offensive end of the court use it the way I think you would prefer him to use it.
I would agree. Yeah, he just, for his size, he should have been more dominant on the attack and in the paint last season than he was overall. And he had his moments, but I just don't think it was consistent enough. His most common shot was a spot up jumper. In fact, you talked about the foul shooting, and that might be a concerning thing. But according to Synergy, his jumpers without a dribble, 53% shooting for the season. That is a good sign there. So a solid spot up shooter. Actually he was most effective as a cutting big man, which you always want to see, particularly getting to the basket. He just didn't do it a ton. Like he scored a bucket a game in a cut to the basket kind of scenario there. Really, really good as a flasher overall. So if you're the kind of listener that listens to this pod all year long, you're familiar with our thoughts on what Kelvin Sampson does with that program. But if you are the kind of listener who's floating in on and listening to some profile prospect stuff and NBA stuff, Walker to me he seems fairly safe as a pick, fairly safe. And by that, I mean, because of his physicality, because of his defensive reliability, I just don't see a strong likelihood for flame out. But I think I mentioned this on the HQ show a little less than 2 weeks ago. I do think there's the potential with because of fit and how he plays, he may just be a role player at best 2-3 years from now. That may or may not be the case, but because I don't see him being right now growing into a top 2-3, maybe not a top 4 offensive option on a team for offense. And maybe that's okay. I mean, Ben Wallace once guided a team to an NBA Finals championship, and look at what he does. So you do have outliers, you do have exceptions there. I think it speaks to some weakness in this year's crop of lottery picks. I find that to be maybe it goes hand in hand, but you've got the best prospect in 20 years and maybe a top 5 all-time NBA prospect period. And he's juxtaposed against a lottery where a lot of other guys, not just because of how they compare to Wembanyama, but just I think even an average year, this feels like a little bit of an inferior lottery. And in some years, we might be talking about Walker as, your 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th guy on the board as opposed to your 5th or your 6th.
Yeah. I think with the body and the defensive versatility, and by all accounts, great work ethic, impressive young man. Like that is one of the other things I remember talking to Kelvin about that he made a point to say is like, we recruit, like very much, who are your parents is something that's important to us. They don't rule out anybody based on family circumstances, but it is a priority with the Houston program. Like, do you have impressive parents? Like, who raised you? Where do you come from? What are you about? I just remember Kelvin making a point that is something that matters to us. And the way he described it last season's team, Jarace Walker included, like he had a team full of nothing but guys who were great, like come from good places, maybe humble places, right? But good places with good hearts and good families. And he just thought he had an entire roster full of hard workers, of guys who were about the right stuff. And he was very intentional in including Jarace in that. I think Jarace picking Houston as opposed to some other places he could have gone I think that says something about you. Like, I don't need to go he was coming to college as a projected top 10 pick to play with a preseason first team All-American. Like, hey, I don't have to come be the big man on campus, get all the shots. Like, I just want to let's go win. Like, I think that says something about him. Not to be naive about the recruiting process, but like, I think that says something about it. I don't know. It's just that body, the defensive versatility combined with what I am told is a great work ethic and great attitude. Like, that guy doesn't miss. Like, he might not be an NBA All-Star someday because that's hard to do, but that guy's not going to. he won't flush out of the league. We'll look up in 8 years, and barring injuries, Jarace Walker will still be guarding people well in the NBA. I'd be shocked if anything.
I would be, yeah, we can put a bow on this with that.
Yeah.
Just because of how versatile he is defensively,
Right.
and why that projects to get even better and more. Again, knock on wood, just no injuries. We're taking injuries out of the equation as always with this kind of stuff. He's got enough with the shot, good enough cutter, reads PNRs well on both ends, where if you're listening, you're a fan of the teams that are going to be in 5, 6, or 7, you get them. I wouldn't say you should be over the moon, but just a really nice piece to help to continue to build around, and we'll see where he winds up going.
Let's get out of here. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck. Shouts to Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching, listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and anywhere else you might get podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them, and that needs to be reflected in the comments over at Apple. So subscribe, follow, rate it, review it. Thank you in advance, and we will talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.